I want to welcome everyone today to a short demo on Creo Layout. Today we're going to look at Creo Layout and also some of the integration between Creo Layout and Creo Parametric. Now you can launch Creo Layout in two ways, one directly or two from within Creo Parametric. We're going to do the latter for this example. So when I go to File New, I see I have a new type, in this case called Layout. Selecting it will give me the option to choose a layout with a template, format, or an empty set. In this case, I'm just going to use one with a format. Layout opens very similar to what you would see in a drawing inside of Creo Parametric. Now Creo Layout's using the ribbon interface, the same as all Creo apps do, so I have tabs across the top on the ribbon with panels of like commands grouped together. Design is basically all of your design, drafting elements, just sketching if you will. Annotation is annotation, text, in this case dimension, tables. Data allows you to import, export, or import images, import other, in this case, files. Also to be able to analyze different elements. And then view, a lot of view tools. You're zooming, you're panning, and some of the other elements we'll look at in the, in this case, the Creo Layout interface. Also, you have the graphics toolbar across the top, very similar to the same toolbar in Creo Parametric. You can right-click it and add or remove functionalities to it. Also, too, to mention, the ribbon can be tailored. It can be customized just like the ribbon can be in Parametric. Just right-click Customize Ribbon. You can change the ribbon. In the upper right are your help menus, your search, command search, and also the learning center. Down in the lower right is my, in this case, smart selection filter, binoculars for searching, and my displaying of my tag area over here on the left, is in the left side. Structure is very similar to the model tree structure. You can create it or you can import it. Tags are a way to group things like layers. So I can select entities and say they go on this tag. For example, select 3 circles and I can say they're on a pulleys tag. Properties are a way to group elements based on property type. Maybe by color, maybe by line type, maybe by entity type in this case. So there's going to be several things we're going to see and we're going to look at. One is primarily the drawing mode, being able to actually draw here within the, in this case, Creo Layout environment. Now for this example, I'm going to change the background color. So on my View tab, in the other tabs, you have a variety of different options to change things. But again, the color, what I'm going to do is I'm going to change on my Data tab, and I'm going to change this to a more, let's say, a darker background so we can see the lines. Lines are going to show up in an orange or a light blue color based on default settings. Now I'm going to go back to Design and I'm going to start to draw. So I'm going to start my line commands. As you can see, a lot of similar functional commands that you have in Creo Parametric. I'm going to start with line, and the first thing I'm going to notice is I have a little XY coordinate that appears next to my, in this case, crosshair. I can use the up and down arrow to toggle between the two and basically enter in my distance or my start point. Now let's say I want to start at the point 5, 5. So I can just type in 5, 5, hit the enter key, and my line starts at 5, 5. Now just like in Parametric, constraints are on by default, so it's making assumptions. So it's snapping to those assumptions. Now I have nothing else to relate to right now, so I see no other constraints. But let's say I want to make this line now 10 units long. So I can key in 10, hit the enter key, and it's 10. Now I see a coincident constraint on the corner. Maybe I'll drag my mouse up and I want this to be 4 units long at a 90-degree angle. Once again, maybe what I'll do in this next example, I want this line to be 4 units long but at a 145-degree angle. And I can continue on creating these different types of elements. Now you can also show temporary constraints, which means you can hover over an endpoint, a midpoint, another line for a given number of seconds, and then that constraint or alignment will appear. As you see here, I have an alignment constraint. I also have a perpendicular constraint. I can turn those on or off, in this case, toggling through some keys on your keyboard, or in this case I can accept these. So what I'll do is I'm going to accept this, in this case, the constraint itself, and then I'm just going to go back and tie this to the very beginning to create my shape. Now I can display those constraints here within the actual model itself, and as I click on entities or hover over entities, I see those constraints appear. Very similar to what you have in Parametric, these are all activated on the fly. You can remove those, delete those if I choose within the element. You can also choose to change or move things. So if I go to my select mode, now in this case, and choose to, let's say, select things or move elements around my screen. I can select a point, and now what I'll see is I can start to move that element freely around the screen, but as I move that, I'm going to see it snap to certain constraints. Coincident, midpoint, midpoint again, tangent, endpoint, equal length lines, parallel lines, cross-secting lines. These are all intelligent drawing aids that are going to turn on as you sketch the element around. You also could just grab an entity, a line, and move the line. Now it's going to stay bound all together at once unless you actually hold the shift key. In this case, you can actually break that line apart or release the shift key and it'll go back together where it originally was. So a lot of flexibility. Now those controls for your drawing aids can be looked at or searched upon on the View tab for aids. In this case, what drawing aids are turned on, and the activation time when you hover over something when you see those constraints. So all of this is controlled here within this element. You can also select multiple entities and choose to move multiple entities. So I can grab both lines and moving both lines, and I can see these, again, assumptions, these constraints start to appear when my lines are equal length in this case, when maybe they're perpendicular, and you can accept those values and move that into that given area. Also, for movement of other elements, again, you can use the alignment constraints, drawing an entity, and in this case, what you're doing is very similar to other 2D drawing tools. You're actually adding dimensions as you sketch. So in this case, maybe I want this radius to be 0.5. So I can key in 0.5, now it's the radius of 0.5. If I want to move this circle, I can go to the center of the circle, grab it, and snap it just by moving it to another endpoint. Again, just pausing wherever that endpoint is at, and that element is now snapped to that endpoint, picking up that constraint in this example. Some other elements, some other techniques, using aligning. So if I, let's say, for example, start a line from this point, and I temporarily pause where I see my alignment constraint, I can now drag, and I have an alignment of this new entity I'm creating. So again, I can have equal length lines, or I can use my, in this case, values to key in my different types of units, what I'm actually trying to create in this example. And then snap. So these are a lot of aids placed in to actually assist with creating entities. Now you could, in this case, use patterns. So I could, let's say, create a linear pattern of this circle, and then I could choose, in this case, number of items, in this case per row, and the number of rows, and then change the spacing between those. So you have a couple of different options when you create patterns on how you can actually pattern those in this example. You also have your trim tools. So you can trim off an entity that you don't want or you don't need out of the actual part itself. Also, same as you have in Creo Parametric, you have your tools to look at to analyze your sketch once it's completed, if it's actually a closed loop, if it's actually part of the design which you're looking at, or I can display open ends. So a variety of different tools you can use within the actual annotation of the elements. Now, some of the other tools, some of the other elements, you can actually format lines. So if I want to change the format, I can look at my Format Entity menu, and I can maybe change the color of the line. Maybe I'll change the line type of the line in this case. I can also start to dimension things. Now, dimensioning is going to be very similar as it was in, or as it is in Creo Parametric. I can, in this case, invoke my dimension command by right-clicking in dimension, illustrating again some of the actual right-click functionality, selecting the entity you want to dimension, moving away, and dropping the dimension. In this case, double-click the dimension opens up the text, allowing you to change the dimension text. Dimension between multiple elements, multiple entities. So maybe I want to show an angle, so I can select multiple entities and then drop my angle inside, outside, or wherever you choose to place that dimension in this case. Dimensions can be deleted as well if you don't want a dimension. You can place in notes. Let's say I want to place an unattached note freely. So I can basically place the note, and I can say type note here, return the line, and here, and here. And then with the note, I can actually select elements, and when you select an element of a note, you'll have a flyout that appears to allow you to format the note. Or you can use the Format tab on the ribbon to format your note. In this case, maybe all of the text, you want to change the color, the height, the orientation, or you maybe want to end in a symbol. Maybe this is a geotall frame you're keying in. You also have the ability to move the note, to drag the note, and to rotate the note. So a lot of these controls are placed right at your fingertips in this case for placement of different elements. Now back to some of the other sketching tools. You can copy and paste. So I can simply just Control C and then Control V, and I copy and paste an element, and I can move it where I want to, reorienting it, in this case realigning it to different elements throughout the actual tool. You can also mirror elements. So if I have a mirror, let's say centerline, I'm just creating a geometry or a center construction center line here within the shape, and if I want to mirror an element about it, let's say I want to mirror this line on the left. Well, I can select the line, choose my mirror tool, choose the center line, and I can mirror that element about the center line. So I have the full capability to change those elements. You can also change lines, in this case to construction lines, making them dashed, or I can change a construction line back to a geometry line in this case. A couple different options, multiple ways to actually create different things. You also have chamfers, rounds, and fillets. Now when I'm creating these, again, it's asking me for the unit, in this case the dimension, as you create the actual element, as you create the fillet in this case. So a variety of different techniques to use. Now let's say you use sketches over and over again. You don't want to actually come in and draw those pieces each time. Well, you could go to your palette. And on your palette, you can look at various section sketches that are already created that you can either put in your personal palette, or you can pull ones that are already generated from the system. And simply just place those on your screen, and now I have that sketch placed about my screen that I can move wherever I choose in the environment. Now if you want to resize or rotate, I can select whatever I want to resize and rotate, and then either choose it from your right click menu or at the toolbar on the top to resize and rotate. Now very similar to Parametric, you have your controls to rotate in this example. You also have your controls to move, and also your control to scale on the element about the screen itself. And again, deleting, if I want to delete something, just highlight it and delete it from your window. So a variety of different tools you can use for designing, for annotating, at least dimensions, and some notes. Now you also can make tables. So you can insert in a quick table if you already have a table for, let's say, revisions that you want to place, or spools for wires, or if you want to just make a blank table. I can drag the number of cells. I'm holding that table, dropping that table on my sheet, then I can just double click in the cell and start to type my text in this case, and then easily create that text within that table. Now I'm zooming in and zooming out within the sheet itself. Some of the zoom capabilities that you have within the tool, for example, you can roll your mouse to zoom in or out, you can pan back and forth, or you can use what's called the zoom port, which will show me actually a window, and then zooming into this window you can move the sub window around your screen and show a different area. Now you can also use, in this case, little snapshots. So maybe I'd like to take a snapshot of this current position. Maybe I'll move down to the lower right, take a snapshot of it. Maybe I'll move into the middle, take a snapshot of it. And finally what I'll do is I'm going to refit and then take a snapshot of that window. And now the snapshots in this case on the bottom, these little views, allow me to actually quickly go back and forth to zooms. They're actually called zoom views. So I can zoom to these views of what I just took a little photograph of, or a snapshot, and then I can minimize that actual part of the screen. So a variety of tools to actually assist you in sketching, designing, creating different elements. You can use your analyst tools to analyze the actual different area, in this case looking at a distance for the distance command. I can look at, as I was saying before, showing overlapping geometry, highlighting open ends. So you have all of these tools to inspect, to assist with your design inside of, in this case, Creo Layout. Now the tags on the right, if I want to group certain elements on a tag, let's say I want to make a tag and I'm going to call this tag, just in this example, circles. Pretty basic because I just have a few circles on the actual screen itself. So I created the tag. Now what I would like to do is create and add the tag to these circles. So I'm going to select those. And then I'm going to say add to, in this case, a tag, and then I want to add it to the tag circle. So now when I select the circle tag, I can actually group those and highlight those together. Now let's say I'm going to take this a step further and I'm going to change the actual line itself. Well, I actually have one here created in blue and all these other lines in orange. Let's say I want to find the properties of one of those. So I'm going to actually create a new property, and I'm going to look for specific lines in this case, where in this case the color and the type may be orange and it may be solid. And then what I'll do is add that as a rule, and I can add more, and I can have and or operators in this case, and then preview my results. Now depending on the color block I chose, it may not be the right color, so I could in this case redefine the entity, and I'll say look for anything blue in this case that's dashed, and then preview my results in this example here. In this case it found the one entity that it was blue and was dashed, and then write that as a rule, and now I have that as another tag for properties here in this example. Now another example is if you want to bring in a sketch, a section from another model. What I could do is use my import technique and import in a specific model, in this case, that already has a section created in it from Creo Parametric. So in this example, I'm going to actually grab a example that has in this case, a sketch created. So I'm going to grab this assembly, or open this assembly. Previewing the assembly, I'll see the assembly here, what it actually looks like. And there's already a section created in this assembly that I see sitting here on the front. It's right at these front pulleys. So when I open this, it's going to open a window. Now depending on your graphic display, depending on your settings, you may see the assembly in this window, you may not. Now I see the three sections. I'm going to look at section A, and I'm going to say yes, bring in the structure of this. So what it'll do is it brings in the structure of any element at that section cut. And then when I zoom in on this, I see I have the section here placed on my screen of what was currently sectioned from that assembly. Now I can choose in this case to move these elements. I can choose in this case maybe to resize these elements. So I'm going to actually resize this, making these elements a little larger. I'll make it maybe 5 times larger, and maybe I'll rotate this by 90 degrees. Now I could use the drag handles, or in this case you could actually just use the ribbon across the top and then be able to place that entity into my actual sketch. And then I could further enhance this. I can add some different changes. I can make modifications to these actual elements itself. Now let's say I want to actually take part of this model and take it over to Creo Parametric. What I'm going to do is actually close this one and create a new one with limited geometry or less geometry in it. So I'm going to make a new layout, in this case, same sheet, and we're going to use this as a pretty basic shape. I'm not really concerned about where I'm starting at, and I'm not really concerned about the shape itself. What I'm going to do in this example is kind of make a, well, I don't know, let's call it the file lane sketch in this case. We're talking basketball here. So anyways, it's a basic sketch. Now the one thing you need to do if you want to share this with Parametric, you have to make these entities public. So what I'll do is add these to the group public, and what it'll do now is allow me to actually add these into Parametric. Now I'm going to save this file in this case, and we'll create it and save it in the actually let's place it on the desktop so I know where it's at in this example. So let's just go out to our desktop in this case, and I'm going to call it in this case test 2. Okay. Now let's create a parametric file. So I'm going to go to new, I'm going to create a part in this case, and part file opens up, very similar to what it would be in this case if you're creating a part in any other method in Parametric. Now I'm going to copy in my geometry, this being one method we're just going to look at today, and what I'm going to do is open up that, in this case, that test2 file that I created, and then I'm going to align it. So I'm going to align it in this little window, coordinate system to coordinate system. I see my sketch, so I'll say one coordinate system to the other coordinate system, and then what I'm going to do is select, in this case, what elements I want to bring in. Now I could, in this case, just select these individually. I can select the whole thing, you have a couple of different varieties of ways to select these. You can also say bring in your references, your datums. In this case, I'm going to choose my datum planes, or axes if I had axes, or my coordinate system. And then when I bring this in, it actually brings this in as copied geometry inside of Creo Parametric. And then once I have this in Creo Parametric, just based on this example here, I can start an extrude tool, in this case defining a sketch on this surface. And now what I can do is use existing geometry if I want in this example to create my new sketch. So maybe I'll just project, in this case, a chain. So I'm going to do 2 chains, or a chain going around the loop, maybe in this example from here to here. And we'll accept we'll just do this block in this example. So I created that sketch. The sketch is actually generated right now. And what I'm ready to do is basically create my feature at this point. So now I have my feature created from that sketch created from Creo Layout. So another quick example, in this case showing you integration between Creo Layout, showing you a little bit of an overview of what Creo Layout is inside of the suite of applications for Creo. Thank you very much.